Why don't we start this episode off with a conversation about politics? I thought, let's talk about something that nobody will be offended by. There's no way to potentially offend anybody if we just talk politics for the duration of this podcast.
I will not.
You will not. All right. Well, I was kidding. Half kidding. But there is a political tilt to this podcast, and that's because you're hearing it here on Wade into Wealth. Not first, but recently after the news came out, you can now trade like your favorite representative in Congress. You can trade stocks just like your favorite representative in Congress. What do you think about that, Gypsy?
It's not something I'll be doing.
No.
But it's interesting.
It's fascinating to me, and we do see very often, you heard in the news, we heard about it a lot the last couple of years during the pandemic, or you hear about a politician making stock trades, and the timing is questionable of it.
But people are interested because I looked at the ticker symbols yesterday, and I think one of them hit a new high.
Yeah.
Granted, they haven't been around for very long, but I did notice that it hit a high yesterday.
So there are two new exchange-traded funds that have hit the market tracking the stock trades of members of Congress. Yes.
Why don't we take a step back
Sure.
and explain what an exchange-traded fund is?
Go ahead.
It's very similar to a mutual fund. Except for the fact that it tends to be a little bit more passively managed and also tends to have less internal expenses. Keywords tend. When you start to get more specialized into something like this, the expenses are going to be more expensive for it. But it's very similar to a mutual fund, almost like a cousin to them.
It's a diversified basket of investments.
Yep.
And it can be as specific or as broad as the fund manager desires.
And a mutual fund trades once at the end of the day. An exchange-traded fund will trade throughout the day.
Like a stock. Yep. So these are exchange-traded funds. Unusual Whales, that name will catch your attention. That's a site that actually tracks the stock trades of politicians. Politicians are required to disclose any stock trade they make, typically within 30 to 45 days of making it. So Unusual Whales, which is the site that keeps these records in concert with Subversive Capital. I initially thought it was Submersive Capital. I'm like, that's a terrible name for an investment company, but it's not. It's Subversive Capital. So they're offering two funds, one that tracks Democratic stock trades and one that tracks Republican stock trades. Now, you already know, but if you're listening, I'll give you the ticker symbols. You see if you can figure out which one would be the Democratic leaning fund and which would lean towards the Republicans. NANC, Nancy, is the Democratic tracking fund.
Minus the Y. But you can see where it's going.
Yeah. If you read it out,
Nancy.
Nancy.
Okay, well, look at that. Look at you.
Right? Or
that's never been one of my strong suits, figuring out what like vanity plates are saying. I've never done well with those.
No, and vanity ticker symbols are for another day, another conversation. And then there is KRUZ, Cruise. At least that's how I read it. So, okay.
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi, Senator.
Makes you wonder, the cruise with a C is already taken? I didn't
must
check.
have been. I don't know.
I did not check yet.
I'm assuming it has. I don't know. I didn't look. So Nancy Pelosi, representative from California. Ted
She's
Cruz.
Republican, right?
She is not, good sir. So yes, Nancy, NANC is the Democrat ETF. Cruz, after Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Raphael Theodore Cruz, his full name actually, is the Republican ETF. So why do you think it would make sense for someone to release an investment like this with the objective of following politicians' stock trades?
Well, it's been in the news a lot lately. I think more
it's
so
always
in the past
news,
couple
but
of years.
yeah, the last couple of years, very much more so.
Paying attention to some of the trades that have been done, largely because you think Congress has they play a large role in the laws.
Well, and they have access. Congressmen have access
a lot more
to
information,
news that the public does not.
Correct. And if you have that information, certainly that would be valuable to know when you're looking to buy or sell a stock.
Sure.
Now, I was reading the article, and the Unusual Whales website was making a very big deal about how a lot of politicians, maybe a majority of them, outperformed the market in 2022. And I was thinking, well, look, it's really hard to outperform the market when it's going up.
Yes.
But when it's going down, if you have any sort of bond exposure or you're not overwhelmingly aggressive in the way you're set up for investments, it's not that big of a shock to see that 70 or 80% of the members of Congress would outperform the market when it's going down.
Based on their demographic, meaning they're typically a little older.
Correct. Yeah, and they may have more conservative investments in their portfolio, but nonetheless,
That's not something to me that is a badge of you're doing everything right, because
Correct,
I mean
yeah.
there are lots of people who did not have as bad of a year last year
Right.
as the market as a whole.
I mean, I think of a majority of our clients, because they may not own 100% stocks, did not go down as much as the
Right.
market did. Now, technically, that means they outperformed the market.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they had said that the members of Congress have outperformed the market 10 straight years, well, that's meaningful.
Yeah.
That's significant. But nonetheless, there have been a number of instances where the timing of the trades that members of Congress have done have been suspect, and their defense is either I didn't do it or my spouse did it.
Right. So between 2019 and 2021, this is according to the New York Times, at least 97 members of Congress reported trades in companies influenced by committees they sat on.
Right.
Very often, CEOs of companies will go testify before a committee of Congress, and they will divulge news that is
Sure.
not public information. So,
But to me, the fact that my spouse did it and I didn't, that's not enough.
well, no, none of the. Well, I mean, but here, all right. So honestly, like I don't really believe much of what any politician says.
Sure.
I just don't. And
Yeah.
so when they've gotten caught, the easiest thing is, oh, my spouse did it or my advisor did it.
And we don't talk about
and
it.
I wasn't
Right.
aware of it. Some said their position sold the positions after being confronted with this news, or moved them into what's called a blind trust, which is where you don't know what's happening or what decisions are being made. And two said the trades were an accident. Now, we place trades every day. Have you ever, I don't know, have you made one on accident? I mean, there have been
have
times
I-
where you bought the wrong share number, or
Yeah.
you sold something meaning to purchase it.
I think you could buy the wrong security if
Okay.
you weren't paying. Have I done that? No.
Right. Right.
If you weren't paying attention. But the coincidence with the timing
Yeah.
and the laws or whoever they would have been meeting with, that seems a little bit odd.
Yeah.
And normally, if you buy the wrong security, you kind of notice it pretty quickly, and you can have that corrected
Yes.
shortly thereafter. Not where you're reporting the trade because that's part of your duty to do it, and getting called out on it, and all of a sudden it's an accident.
Yeah.
So
So
they have reporting parameters they have to follow.
they do. They
you
have
think
to
they'd
follow
catch
them.
catch the accident.
But there
at
are
that time.
Well, again, let's not give these people. Let's not
Well,
put too much faith in.
If
these
it was
people.
an accident, you would think
Yeah,
that they would catch it at that moment, but who knows?
So, but here's a question, and this comes up in my mind every time we read about this in the news: is could a congressperson have made a stock trade that they were unaware of?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely, and the answer is yes to that. And that is actually something that
I suspect this would be, I would guess that a decent number of the members of Congress have an investment advisor or a broker who may have what's called discretionary trading authority,
Right.
meaning the investment advisor or their broker does not have to first talk to them to make trades in their account. They just have the authority to go make adjustments as they see fit.
Real quick explainer on that. There are plenty of different kinds of investment portfolios.
Sure.
Whether it is a computer model that is making investment decisions to buy Eastman Chemical and sell Raytheon.
Yep.
Buy a company or sell a company. There are also
Purely examples that are being thrown
right,
out
and
there.
there are also portfolios where you sign off and give your advisor permission to make trades without notifying you. You receive notification after the fact.
Yep.
And we have both met with many folks that were either a prospect or had an account somewhere else where that was happening. We don't typically do a ton of that.
No, but we also have model portfolios that are
Right.
run here
Yes.
in-house, and those are adjustments are made without consulting the client.
Brighton
They're
Securities
first.
Capital Management,
Right.
which is a program that does that. You're correct. So I can see where that could happen. I have no indication that that is the case, but I can see that being a
Yeah,
scenario
sure.
where it does happen. It's
In
actually,
some of the instances, absolutely.
it's actually not, that to me is not out of the realm of possibility at all. However, what I think is important is, and if I were elected or a person in Congress, I would want to be aware of how that can look.
Mhm.
How can that look? And it doesn't look good.
No.
And in a world where, I mean, people lie quite frequently,
If you profit off of it, it doesn't look good. No one's going to care if you lose money. off of it.
No, but nobody's investing to try to lose money. So,
right.
but I think there's a lack of trust in a lot of our elected officials, regardless of what party you belong to or favor. And I think that a lot of the times it needs to be thought of, well, how does this look? Now, and we also just don't want to put a ton of blind faith into our elected leaders. And I don't know the answer. Is it once you're elected to Congress? I think there should be something where you're just transacting in index funds, where you just say, well, look, once I'm elected to Congress, I'm only going to transact index funds. I'm not. You can keep your existing investments.
Okay,
if
yes, that was going to be the
no.
the
That's what I'm
objection
saying,
I was going
because
to
I don't
raise.
think it would be fair to say you have to sell all your investments and potentially incur significant capital gains
tax issues.
But if it were me, I would say from now on, I will only own. And really, if it was me in Congress, I'd say I'm only going to purchase U.S. traded index funds that are made up of U.S. companies.
Mm-hmm.
That would be because with an index fund, you're talking hundreds of investments within one. So that would be my answer to it. But anyway, let's get back to these new funds. How are they made up? This to me is fascinating.
In terms of the breakdown between them?
In terms of
we only have a list of the top holdings. We don't have, I suppose we probably could have gotten a list of all the holdings.
No, the list of all the holdings is available. I put the top 10 for each because that is kind of the meat and potatoes of it.
Let's see. Largest holdings in the Democrat Fund, NANC, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Apple, Salesforce, NVIDIA, Disney, CrowdStrike, Philip Morris, and UPS.
Yep. Okay.
For Cruz, KRUZ, the Republican Fund, Magellan Midstream Partners, Microsoft Energy Transfer Limited Partnership, Dow, Cash.
That's just cash.
Yeah, Philip Morris, United Therapeutics, Shell, Las Vegas Sands, and Accenture. So there are some differences there.
Yeah.
A little bit more energy tilt on the Republican side, which probably wouldn't shock you.
No, it's not surprising at all. When you stop and think about it, again, demographically, in the southern parts of the United States, where there is predominantly more oil and energy production happening, think of a state like Texas. Texas skews more conservative. So it stands to reason that, yes, the conservative tilt fund would have more energy and oil exposure, where are a lot of tech companies headquartered. California.
Yep.
Out west, typically in countries, in states and areas that are a little more liberal.
Yep.
So it's not surprising to me. I was surprised that Philip Morris is one of the two
and
companies
both of them,
that is the top in the top
huge
10
cigarette maker.
Not surprised by Microsoft at all, but
No.
Philip Morris, I was like, really? Huh.
Microsoft you find in the top 10 of almost every mutual fund, growth-oriented mutual fund. But yeah, Philip Morris, if you had me pick, take 5 shots at a company that's going to be in both of those, Philip Morris would not have been one of them.
No, I would not have picked Philip Morris at all.
Especially with a lot of the issues over vaping and just cigarette use. But, whatever.
No, whatever. It just, that was surprising to me. But I had the same thought that you did, is that it's interesting how different they are. The Democratic fund to me looks a lot just like a large cap growth fund. It's got the large growth tech companies. What was also interesting to me is cash is one of the top 10 holdings in the Republican fund. And now again, that's I can see the case made where that's a party that typically can be right now is a little more pessimistic on the state of the economy.
Sure.
And so there may be a desire to hold some cash there.
Right.
Interesting to me. Interesting to you, perhaps. Something to be aware of, too. These ETFs have an annual expense of 0.75%.
Which in and of itself is not that high. For ETFs, it's higher.
Yes.
For a mutual fund, that wouldn't be that high. But this is also a very specialized
and an actively
type of
managed fund.
That doesn't surprise me, and wouldn't be enough to deter me. But the next part is probably the biggest part that might be enough to deter me, which is
in the TV or newspaper business, this would be called burying the lead.
Yeah.
We left a fairly important part of all of this to the end,
which is the fact that the members of Congress have to report their holdings within 30 to 45 days of a trade. So we're talking a month to a month and a half leeway.
And some wait even longer than that.
Right. And what we're talking about is them having access to information that the public does not know. But give it a month or two, And the public probably knows that at that point. So that window of time of the benefit, theoretically, that they would have to act, by the time makes its way to this fund, that window could have already, not could have, very likely would have already passed on the information they would have had access to it getting to the general public.
That, to me, is the most important part throughout this whole podcast, is that the idea is you would be investing in the same things your elected leaders are, because they are privy to information that may not yet be public or widely available.
But they're still going to have a month or two head start.
They have a month to a month and a half head start on you.
Which is like the whole point of all this.
And in many cases, the filings are not updated within the time frame they're supposed to be. Yeah. It can be significantly longer before stock trades and investment transactions are repeated. So it's fascinating to me, but keep that in mind.
It's interesting. It is interesting, and I think it will be something interesting to follow. It is not something that I will be investing in.
No, but listen, there are also cases where, and I would say there are cases where we have clients, and I feel lucky in this, in that a lot of our clients share their political leanings with us. And obviously they do that because they feel... And I have clients that we are on the same side of the spectrum and clients that know we are on the exact opposite sides of the spectrum. But we're able to have a respectful dialogue about it, and there's trust there that they're willing to share that with us, which I appreciate. But I could see a scenario where a client that is very much aligned with one belief or the other is like, I would like to own that. And I don't know that I would talk them out.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't have an issue. From my perspective, if it's coming from the avenue, and maybe it's not, maybe I'm viewing it in the wrong way, from the avenue of they have access to information that the public does not, and therefore we're thinking that these funds could outperform the market because of that information, that delay in knowing the holdings, to me, would be enough to cancel that out.
Well, so what you're saying is, I think, you are not going to go out, and nor am I, going to go out and actively recommend this.
No.
To clients. But if somebody were to bring this up and be like, I would be interested in that.
And I don't have a problem with a lot of these top holdings.
I think you can do a lot worse. And the thing is, because it's obviously going to be a lot more diversified than saying, I want to buy XYZ company.
Right. Yep.
So, I mean, I think you can do worse than these.
Oh, yeah. There's plenty of worse investments.
Not something that I'm going to say, hey, let's go try to beat the market. You know, the Republican fund is a lot better this year. I have no idea. There's a delay in them, but it did. When I read it, I thought, this is interesting.
This is going to be very interesting to follow.
Yeah.
And see what longer term, assuming they keep this going, see what longer term performance metrics look like.
I would be very interested to see in 3, 5, and 10 years' time how this is done, because it is interesting, and it's certainly something that that gets people's goat from time to time. Mm-hmm. So, that's it. If you want to invest and trade stocks like your congressman,
or woman,
or congresswoman, I mean, you can try now with these funds, and now you know the tickers, so you can tell them Wade into Wealth sent you. You know what movie that's a quote from? It's
a paraphrase from Pee-wee.
Pee-wee's Herman. Yeah, tell
him Large
Marge sent you.
Yeah, that was a big movie of yours movie. when we were kids.
Didn't like the clown scene at the end.
I mean, it's kind of creepy. I remember. I can't even
watch that as an adult, and I thought, I can totally see being freaked out by that at the end.
It's been so long.
And there's no basement in the Alamo. That's where Pee-wee's bike was supposed to be hiding, the basement of the Alamo.
That's too bad.
No basement in the Alamo.
That's too bad.
Okay.
Too bad for Pee-wee.
Our time here is done. Thanks for being with us. This is Wade into Wealth.